was a British multinational conglomerate with active subsidiaries in a variety of industries from the 1970s to the early 2000s. Umbrella had influence in the production and sale of cosmetics, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, industrial machinery, consumer products, healthy foods, the transportation industry, and tourism. The wide variety of Umbrella's subsidiaries was typical of large-scale corporations, although it was intentionally built to cover up illegal activities. Shortly after opening its pharmaceutical subsidiary, Umbrella began developing biological weapons for armies around the world as part of a global conspiracy to accumulate deadly viruses directly prohibited by the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention. Umbrella Pharmaceuticals was able to cover this up by researching vaccines for the same viruses. Other Umbrella industries, such as the Paraguas Line Company tourism business, generated income from passenger transport across the Atlantic as a front for transporting viral weapon samples from West Africa, while Umbrella Industries was responsible for developing the anti-BOW arsenal. Umbrella's true aim was not capitalist-driven industry monopolization, but rather eugenics. This fact was known only to the corporate executives, who shared the belief that their main goal was to fund the Wesker Project, which involved the birth of a new race of virally enhanced, well-educated superhumans who would advance human civilization over the coming generations, with the founders of Umbrella ruling over them as gods. The project was not realized, with the loss of all but 2 candidates in 1998 and their subsequent deaths. The Umbrella Corporation collapsed in 2003 following the loss of Umbrella USA in the Raccoon trials, which determined that the corporation was liable for compensation in the incident of the destruction of Raccoon City in 1998. The verdict led Umbrella to bankruptcy, and they and their subsidiaries closed over the next year, with a stigma large enough that some were not purchased by rival companies. The origins of the Umbrella Corporation lie in the eugenic movements that dominated European and North American debate in the early 20th century. Its 3 most prominent founding members were Dr. Oswell Spencer, Dr. Edward Ashford, and Dr. James Marcus, who were classmates at the university. All were virologists with some association with the eugenics movement. The immediate prehistory of Umbrella truly begins in 1966, when Dr. Marcus developed the hypothesis that a mythical West African flower known as Stairway to the Sun conferred powers on its consumers through a mutagenic viral infection. On a trip to the Indapaya tribal lands, the legendary flower was discovered in an underground garden, and a virus was discovered within it. However, flowers cultivated in the United States failed to replicate the virus. Requiring significant funding beyond their aristocratic links to achieve his eugenic dream, Spencer formed Umbrella Pharmaceuticals in the name of Ashford and an indifferent Marcus, and established a base in the Indapaya Garden so that samples of the progenitor virus could be transported across the Atlantic. Needing more money, the 3 agreed on a plan later known as the T-Virus Project, in which they would independently develop strains of the progenitor to sell to the U.S. military as a weapon. The T-Virus Project expanded significantly during this period thanks to the research led by Dr. William Birkin in the late 1970s, inspired by the independent but unrelated work of Marcus in 1978. Marcus thought about not using the T-Virus as a weapon of death, but instead using its ability to mutate to keep the infected alive, though mentally impaired, violent, and cannibalistic, and able to move even after their heart stopped. As Umbrella's power grew, the founding circle began to fight among themselves. Dr. Ashford was the first victim, murdered in 1968 by his own T-virus prototype in an accident that is believed to have been orchestrated by Spencer. Marcus became unpopular among the executive body due to his use of executive apprentices as guinea pigs and was eventually executed by Umbrella's security service in 1988. Edward's son, Dr. Alexander Ashford, was not a virologist and thus became irrelevant to the Biological Weapons Project, although his genetically engineered daughter, Alexia, restored the Ashford family's prestige. Both became infected with the experimental T. veronica virus and disappeared from public life, believed dead. The surviving son, Alfred, took over minor administrative roles, and his family no longer posed a threat to Spencer. Beyond the three founders in Spencer's circle, Dr. Brandon Bailey was forcibly retained in Africa until his execution in 1998 to prevent a security breach. Doctors Henry and Beardsley would die sometime in the early 1990s, and their respective daughters, Christine and Mylene, took control of their facilities in Europe. Although Mylene Beardsley had plans to take over the company, she did not represent a serious threat. With the discovery of a rare immunity to the virus, the T-virus project expanded again in the early 1980s, when labs around the world developed chimeric animals that would be sent by the military to kill the survivors, known as bioorganic weapons. During this period, the Umbrella Corporation had grown to such a size that it needed regional subsidiaries to handle operations. Umbrella USA controlled the U.S. facilities and administration, headquartered in Chicago, with the Arklay Laboratory as its main facility for biological weapons research until the opening of the nest in 1991 for research on the G virus strain, a viral progenitor capable of repairing dead tissue and, in theory, could transform the infected into superhumans as Spencer desired. Umbrella Europe was formed during the 1980s from the partial integration of national branches in Western Europe due to frustration with Umbrella USA's influence on research. Umbrella Europe pioneered the Nemesis project, a plan to create an intelligent parasite that would serve as a brain replacement to counteract Umbrella USA's failure to prevent the T-virus from causing brain damage and loss of intelligence. This plan was executed alongside Umbrella USA's Tyrant project to develop a superhuman weapon and was integrated in 1998 to create the Nemesis T prototype as a European achievement, while Umbrella USA's own countermeasure was the Talus project to develop an organic computer interface, whereby an advanced AI could pilot a Tyrant. Apart from the two main continental groups, there was Umbrella Japan, which managed Umbrella's biotechnology and machinery research in 1987. By the end of the decade, Umbrella had also acquired the ships Queen Zenobia, Queen Dido, and Queen Semiramis for the Paraguas Line Company, which would transport biological weapons overseas along with the separately purchased Spencer Rain. The planes would also transport biological weapon cargo through the Antarctic Transport Terminal, a facility first opened in the 1960s for Ashford's research, but almost exclusively used as an international transport depot after Dr. Alexia Ashford's disappearance in 1983. However, Umbrella USA oversaw the most successful sectors of Umbrella, with a third of the 100,000 residents of Raccoon City working for its active subsidiaries there. In the early 1990s, the collapse of the Soviet Union allowed Umbrella to expand its paramilitary organizations, the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service and the Umbrella Security Service, as well as the Umbrella Intelligence Division and its monitors. The UBCS was founded by hiring mercenary work from communist guerrillas and nationalist terrorists arrested shortly after the collapse, and retired soldiers from the Warsaw Pact states. In 1994, a training camp for anti-BOW was established on Rockford Island, managed by Alfred Ashford, Edward's grandson. Its military expansion from this point is linked to the UBCS founder and commander-in-chief, Colonel Sergei Vladimir, whose special genes gave Umbrella USA the opportunity to finally mass-produce the Tyrant line by experimenting with his clones. By 1998, Umbrella had an impressive air force consisting of UH-60 Blackhawks, AH-6 Little Birds, CH-53 Sea Stallions, AV-8 Harrier jets, and C-130 Hercules capable of landing on water. Its ground forces were armed with M4A1 rifles and MP5 submachine guns, and the USS was equipped with British-made S-10 gas masks. In its intelligence expansion, Umbrella had successfully implanted moles within the U.S. military, such as Dr. Albert Wesker, and learned of American ambitions to eventually abandon support for Umbrella with the reactivation of their own biological weapons program. Nonetheless, Umbrella's influence over the nations to which it sold weapons remained strong, to the point that when Plant Number 57 in West Africa suffered an outbreak, the massacre by the UBCS of everyone in the nearby town was covered up by the government, and a case of human experimentation that went terribly wrong in a hospital in the Arklay Mountains ended without police investigation, and the media did not identify Umbrella in the incident, The hospital simply closed in 1993. A news reporter who investigated the case was killed in 1996, and his body was thrown into the nearby Ames River without a follow-up investigation linking him to the case. Umbrella's success began to decline in 1998 due to two factors: industrial espionage and internal destabilization. In 1998, Umbrella USA had been infiltrated by Chinese agent Ada Wong on behalf of Umbrella's rival company in organic weapons research. She formed a relationship with the new head of research at the Arklay Laboratory, Dr. John Clemens, who gathered information on current projects along with limited information about Birkin's G virus, which the company soon took an interest in. However, the trigger for Umbrella's decline began in May 1998 with a mysterious containment failure at the Arklay Laboratory. Although the reason for the failure is unknown, a BOW developed by Dr. Marcus a decade earlier, known as the Leech Queen, was responsible. The facility was closed, but the Cerberus BOWs escaped their cages and went to the Arklay Mountains, killing and partially consuming several hikers over the next 2 months and injuring others, who then turned into zombies. Umbrella's armed teams in the Arklays were unable to destroy the BOWs during their attempt to reopen the nearby executive training school. Since 1996, Albert Wesker had retired from the U.S. Army and was now in charge of the STARS, a team funded by Umbrella independent of the Raccoon City Police Department. Wanting to cover up the entire incident, Umbrella ordered Wesker to send his team to the Arklay Mountains and allow the BOWs to kill them while he destroyed incriminating material, recorded combat data on the effectiveness of the creatures against his comrades, recovered any data from the Arklay Laboratories projects, and finally blew up the facility to eliminate any connection Umbrella had with the murders. However, Wesker had decided to leave Umbrella and join the rival company, having judged that Umbrella was already doomed. Instead of delivering his data to Umbrella USA as expected, he faked his death and escaped the explosion, with 4 of his comrades corroborating his death. Meanwhile, Dr. Birkin also decided to leave Umbrella. Having failed to impress Spencer and received an offer to join his inner circle, Birkin made plans to surrender himself to the U.S. military authorities, along with samples of the T virus and the G virus. In the weeks leading up to his surrender, he unleashed the T virus in other facilities, such as a sewage treatment plant and the newly inaugurated P-12A facility, to process failed experiments. This caused the T virus to slowly spread through Raccoon City, which by mid-September had Raccoon General Hospital under strict quarantine. Expecting Umbrella to learn of the deal, Birkin paid Police Chief Brian Irons to clean the sewers, which allowed a policeman to patrol and interrupt a USS team handling C4 charges. Upon learning of the operation, Birkin released the biological weapons Hunter Rs from his laboratory, which killed the rest of the research staff and his own guards, so that he and his wife, Annette, were the only people aware of the G virus. The USS operation went wrong when Team Alpha, under the orders of Hunk, shot Birkin during his attempt to recover a G virus sample, unaware that Birkin still had a sample in his possession. Birkin injected himself with this sample and transformed into a powerful monster, rampaged through the sewers, and killed everyone except Hunk, and destroyed the briefcase with the virus samples. This exposed the sewer's ecology to the T virus, which, after a brief but violent competition between rats and giant cockroaches, led the rats to flee to Victory Lake, Raccoon City's reservoir, infecting the employees of the Raccoon Dam and allowing the contaminated water to find its way into the city. Umbrella became aware of the events in Raccoon City on September 16th, when they learned of hospital cases of a cannibal disease. With the water contamination spreading the virus to tens of thousands, the UBCS received deployment orders and was sent to evacuate civilians, with the expectation that the outbreak would be contained with the help of the U.S. Army and the National Guard, while also giving Umbrella USA and Umbrella Europe the opportunity to test their bioorganic weapons in combat. Nemesis was sent to the city with orders to find and eliminate the surviving stars. The experimental bioorganic weapons Hunter Beta and Hunter Gamma were sent by the U.S. and European divisions respectively for combat testing. However, the UBCS was eliminated shortly after their arrival on September 26th, and federal troops and the National Guard withdrew from the city and imposed blockades, leaving the survivors to fend for themselves. An influential U.S. official, Derek C. Simmons, used his influence in the U.S. government, particularly Ron Davis, to push his contingency plan to destroy the city with an experimental air and fuel bomb. On October 1st, the National Security Council, the President, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff made the decision to destroy the city, which was immediately bombed. Umbrella, its rival company, the U.S. Army, a U.S. terrorist organization, and a black market dealer managed to obtain samples of the G virus through their respective channels, and all evidence linking any of the parties to the disaster was destroyed or covered up. Unable to ignore the power of Umbrella any longer, Congress voted in a session to suspend Umbrella USA's right to conduct business in the country and federalize its assets, while the president himself resigned due to public criticism over his decision to destroy the city. Despite initial journalistic reports from survivors about the incident, including an article by survivor Alyssa Ashcroft, the threat of biological weapons to the world was covered up, meaning that the bombing of Raccoon City could not be defended by the government or the media. As a result of the Raccoon City incident and the loss of the U.S. Army's Delta Team units in the city, the U.S. Department of Defense established the Anti-Umbrella Pursuit and Investigation Team, an anti-BOW unit within STRATCOM, to take charge of biological weapons, and it was given the order under Antivirus Weapons Protocol, number 7600, authorizing any unsolicited operation in other countries to address outbreaks. Umbrella continued to decline steadily after Raccoon City. In November, Dr. Spencer decided it was time to clear house and closed Umbrella's facilities in Africa to prevent the discovery of the progenitor virus, and its employees, including Brandon Bailey, died shortly thereafter. In November, STRATCOM agent Leon S. Kennedy sent investigator Ark Thompson to Umbrella's facilities on Sheena Island. His investigation led directly to an intentional outbreak when his commander, Vincent Goldman, believed he was an Umbrella intelligence operative recording his illegal activities there. Apart from Ark and 2 children, it is believed that the entire island population is dead, and the outbreak culminated in an explosion that destroyed Umbrella's mass production facilities for the tyrant. In December, Umbrella's training camp on Rockfort Island was destroyed and its soldiers annihilated in an attack by the rival company's paramilitary group, HCF, and their Hunter BOWs created from data stolen from Dr. Wesker's Arklay laboratory. The surviving Umbrella personnel fled to the Antarctic transport terminal, but they brought the T-virus with them. The facility was destroyed when former STARS member Chris Redfield activated the self-destruct system. Over the following years, Umbrella found it increasingly difficult to keep its employees in check, particularly with the loss of its penitentiary complexes on Rockfort and Sheena Islands. Rogue employees slowly introduced biological weapons into the black market, although as the outbreaks were still being successfully covered up by the United States, it is unknown how many bioterrorist attacks took place, although the U.S. established another anti-bioterrorism force, the Federal Bioterrorism Commission, at the start of the War on Terror for such an event. In 2002, former executive Morpheus D. Duval led a terrorist operation to raid Umbrella Europe's Paris laboratory, where samples of the T virus and the experimental T plus G virus were stored. Later, the group boarded the Spencer Rain while it was transporting Hunter elites to an unidentified recipient in North America and threatened to launch missiles designed to disperse the T virus in the United States and China, unless they were paid $5 billion. A coordinated effort by STRATCOM and the Chinese Ministry of Security ended the crisis, and a cover-up prevented the media from knowing about it. In 2003, Umbrella was in serious trouble, and a chemical plant in the Caucasus, bought in 1998 through a shell company, became its de facto base of operations. The facility, commanded by Colonel Sergei Vladimir, oversaw the final preparation of the Talos project, since it was recovered from the Arklay laboratory just before Wesker's arrival. The base also stored the UMF-013, a supercomputer that held all of Umbrella's research data, which, in the event of Umbrella's collapse, could be salvaged by a group seeking to reclaim its legacy. With this data, The bioorganic weapons that had previously been declared worthless were being mass-produced to prevent the corporation from declaring bankruptcy. Agents expanded their sales to take advantage of the war on terror and BOWs. However, combat deployment slowly became a reality. After a bioorganic weapons operation in South America by STRATCOM agent Kennedy, all operations were officially kept quiet, and the bioorganic weapons were mostly kept secret from the public. In January 2003, the Caucasus facility suffered an outbreak, and reports of attacks in a nearby village soon drew the attention of both Dr. Wesker and the private anti-biohazard service. The village, whose people had been hired by Colonel Vladimir to protect important umbrella materials and store BOWs like Hunter Alpha for transfer, was killed or otherwise infected when they inadvertently locked themselves in with a group of zombies while fleeing from the monsters. The village was burned down, and Wesker successfully obtained what he wanted. But Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine correctly deduced that there was an umbrella base nearby. Soon after, both forces converged on the chemical plant and killed the mutants Talos and Colonel Vladimir, although Dr. Wesker managed to download Umbrella's research data for his own purposes. Until 2003, Umbrella fought a costly legal case in the United States to reverse the federalization of Umbrella USA and clear any association with the Raccoon City incident, which, if lost, would lead them to bankruptcy due to compensation claims. Although two former Umbrella employees, Yoko Suzuki and Linda Baldwin, testified against Umbrella in court, Umbrella was able to argue their innocence based on the lack of evidence and, with the help of false witnesses, spent 4 years trying to shift all blame to the United States and accuse them of covering up their involvement. The trial reached a shocking conclusion when Dr. Wesker made a covert deal with the court and provided excerpts from Umbrella's files to demonstrate their direct involvement in the incident. These pieces of evidence were not allowed to be shown to the public to protect the interests of the United States. After this verdict, Umbrella Pharmaceuticals and Umbrella Corporation not only declared bankruptcy, but U.S. and Russian intelligence services initiated an international manhunt for Dr. Spencer, seeking his arrest for crimes that occurred in both countries. Spencer remained in hiding for a long time and was only found several years later. With Umbrella's bankruptcy, its Japanese subsidiary was among the only branches left and went into liquidation in March 2004, when no company in Japan was willing to risk its reputation by purchasing it. Hey, don't go just yet. If you enjoyed my video, I'd love to recommend another one for you to watch.